Hello, everyone. It's Jamie here, Jamie Brewster's
Got it.
Musical Heroes, and I'm thrilled and delighted to have our guest today, Paul Von Mertens from Chicago, with us today. Um, Past musical director, of course, of Brian Wilson's band and all that wonderful music. And we're going to race through a lot of stuff this morning, and well, this morning in Paul's time. Here we are in good afternoon our time. Paul, welcome to the show. Welcome to the channel. It's great to see you. Can I ask you, Paul, very, very
Thank you.
brief, pleasure. Do you come from a musical family?
I, I don't come from a musical family per se, but my parents were always interested in all kinds of art and music. Um, they went to see the Chicago Symphony. They had a subscription to the symphony and went to hear that great orchestra. And I went sometimes with them as a child. So um, there are no other musicians in my family, but a lot of support for art and music.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's great to hear that. And you've got various musical qualifications, I think, haven't you?
Yes, I well, I played clarinet as a child. When I switched to saxophone in high school, when I was about 14, I suddenly became a lot more interested in practicing and playing other kinds of music because although I liked the clarinet, it wasn't really the main exponent of music that I was listening to at the time, which was more, pop music and rock and roll and that kind of thing. So saxophone really uh, fired my imagination, and I completed an undergraduate degree in classical saxophone, of all things,
Wow,
from DePaul University, and I consider myself a student even now.
amazing. How long is that? How long is that graduate course? Is that it's a few years to study saxophone, I guess.
It's for a musical instrument major in college. It's a 4 year
Wow,
degree,
wow,
so it's a 4 year program. And
incredible.
during that time, I studied all of the uh, French pedagogy, which is kind of the foundation of what they call the French School of Saxophone playing, which is strictly classical. It's not a jazz uh, form at all. Um, uh, but I think it gave me a good foundation in the technical aspects of playing the instrument. And I really enjoyed the music, and it gave me a broader experience of how to use my own instrument in different ways. I'm going to turn off my phone here. It's beeping.
Okay. Did you always figure you're going to be a musician professionally? Is that something that came to you really early in your life? That this was the route for you?
I think so. When I was very, very young, um, as I said, my parents exposed me to a lot of different kinds of art and music, and I remember seeing a Picasso exhibit at the Art Institute when I was maybe 6 years old, 6 or 7, um, and was really interested in other abstract artists, even at that young age, just because it was kind of fascinating to me that you could make a picture that wasn't necessarily representational of uh, reality. So even when I was very young, if people asked me what I wanted to be, I would say I wanted to be an artist because
Hmm.
it seemed like artists had an interesting life. They had a lot of fun and they could just sit around and draw pictures all day, which is what I did when I was 6 years old. So
Okay.
uh, I guess that initial impulse of exploring art and creativity was started at a young age. Um, but by the time I graduated from high school, when I was 17, I was sure that that's what I wanted to do. I didn't have any other career plans or notions or ideas. In fact, I had no plan except that I wanted to play. So,
Okay.
yeah.
When was the first sort of step into the real world of making some money out of music and playing with people and so on. When was that first step, and how did that happen?
Uh, when I think I was 14, and had just started playing the saxophone in addition to clarinet. And uh, I had a summer job with a uh, with a theater company that performed Shakespeare in the park, and uh, they were doing a production of Midsummer Night's Dream, and I was hired as a stagehand because the set had to be put up and taken down every night because it was
Yeah.
outdoors. It was in
Sure.
a
Okay.
public park,
Okay.
um, and uh, that production, incidentally, featured some actors that would go on um, uh, to greater fame and fortune. David Mamet, the playwright, played the role of Oberon in that production. And at the time, he was a struggling playwright. Um, that summer, he was literally writing American Buffalo and living at the Lincoln Hotel on Clark Street and doing little acting jobs on the side to make some money. So he was in the cast. Also, William H. Macy, who has gone on to uh, uh, an outstanding career in film and television, played Puck in that production. Um, it turned out that it was very successful, and they decided to extend it for a few weeks to the end of summer. The the kid, I have to say, he must have been a kid. He seemed older to me, but uh, he was playing clarinet in the little band on stage. Incidentally, Rocco Jans wrote the music and played piano. Rocco's a well-known film and theater composer now. Um, uh, but the clarinet player had to leave the show because he was going off to college and he couldn't continue in the extension. And Rocco looked at me and said, "Well, you play clarinet, don't you?" And I said, not professionally. And he goes, "Well, come over to my house. I'll teach you the music. And then you can make $40 a night instead of $20 a night," which was what I was getting for being a
Brilliant. Fantastic.
stagehand.
Uh-huh.
So I continued both jobs. Uh, I set up the stage, played the show, and then tore the stage down. And I felt like I was a real musician for the first time. Like, wow, I'm getting paid. I'm hanging out with all these interesting people. And I really think there was no looking back at that point.
That's amazing. I love that story. Really, really great. Really great. So you were sort of multifaceted even then. You could turn your hand to building and taking stages down and play music. I think that's fantastic because moving on to, jumping quite a bit because I know you're short on time. Can I ask all the guys on the show and listening to the show want to know where did you first, I'm jumping a lot of time here. Where did you first come across Brian and the opportunity to play with him and the band? How did that all come how did that all come to be?
Well, after I finished my music degree in school, I started uh, working and really doing any kind of musical job I could do, and built up a career as a freelance musician, and you know played all over the city for weddings and parties. I did musical theater. I literally played on the street sometimes, just doing anything that I could do that had to do with music, and it had to either be creative or pay or both in the rare
Right,
situation
sure.
that both of those boxes were checked. Um, and So I got myself into the what they called the jingle scene, which was commercial music, and was a big part of the recording industry in Chicago. That is jingles and commercial music. Uh, so for many years, I was working as a freelance musician,
Mhm.
playing radio and TV commercials, playing Broadway shows and pit orchestras. Um,
Excellent.
and weddings and bar mitzvahs and really just about anything. And throughout that time, I was continuing to work on mastering the other woodwind instruments, flute and clarinet especially,
Mhm.
because it really interested me to have some different arrows in my quiver and have a different voice that I could use with a different instrument. Um, and although this was not the plan, it turned out to be uh, beneficial for me in terms of finding steady work, because if you can double, you're
Yeah.
more valuable, and certainly playing in a pit orchestra usually requires a significant amount of doubling.
Okay.
Um, so I had a reputation as a recording session player, and I was got a phone call from um, Jim Peterick, who was working with Brian on some songs on the Imagination album. I knew Jim from doing sessions for him, and he invited me to do a session with Brian at Brian's home. He had a studio in his home in St. Charles, Illinois at that time.
Yeah.
Um, and in fact, he described the project to me and said, you know, if you could just bring all of your instruments, that would be great. And Brian will choose what he wants you to play. And uh, all this time, I thought he was talking about a Brian Wilson tribute album.
Okay.
So I said, wait, you mean Brian's going to be there? And Jim said, yeah, it's his album.
Wow.
So that was the Imagination album. I played a number of sessions and worked with Brian on that record, mostly with him dictating parts for me to play. He would sit there and um, just treat me like a piano or something. You know, he would
Hey,
sing a part to me. I would play it back to him
excellent.
until he was satisfied, and then go, okay, record it. Um,
Wow.
so that was my first experience with Brian, and that evolved into some plans for touring and doing concerts and that kind of thing. And uh, it just sort of kept rolling from there. I was part of the band. The um, guys from LA came out to St. Charles to rehearse for our first shows, and you know, we never stopped performing after that. So
How did you got a Chicago group? So there was yourself and Scott and various other guys on the Chicago side. Then you've got the LA side. When did you first all get together and meet? When was that first meeting? Was that for the Imagination album, or was that after?
yeah, that was for the initial tour.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
rehearsed at the studio in St. Charles with Bob Lizick is from Chicago. The
yeah.
drummer at the time was at first it was um, I'll think of it in a minute, but uh, yeah, we gathered. It was in January, a terribly
I,
cold
I
and
remember
snowy
hearing.
January, and
Yeah,
we so that was when we first met each other and started working on the music, and did the first couple of shows. I think the very first show was in Ann Arbor, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah,
There was
yeah.
before that there was a concert in St. Charles that was filmed, but it didn't involve the LA guys.
Okay.
That was kind of a one-off with uh, other um, musicians like Timothy B. Schmidt and Christopher
That's right.
Cross and others who had
Yeah,
worked with Brian. So the Ann Arbor show and that initial outing was the first time that the LA and Chicago band was gotten together, which became really the core of Brian's band going
yeah.
forward.
I was talking with David Leaf several weeks ago, and he said the whole story of Brian and Smile, he said it's like a row of dominoes. If one isn't in place, none of it would have happened. And I guess you're part of this domino situation, aren't you? Where you got the Wondermints, which were
Yeah.
part of it, and on the other side was yourself and the other guys, which were also part of this group of dominoes. And if you hadn't been there, maybe none of it would have happened. What do you think of that? Is that
Right. Um, I'm keenly aware of that. Oh, by the way, Todd Zuckerman
Todd
was the
Zuckerman?
very
Todd,
first
yes.
drummer who did
Todd,
those
yeah.
initial
That's
dates.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, Todd Zuckerman,
Yeah.
uh, wonderful player, and uh, but he was taken away by Styx, and Jim
Yes, he was.
Hines then
Yeah.
became the regular drummer for a long time.
Mm.
Um, and as far as the domino effect you're talking about, I feel it keenly because um, from what I just told you, I realized that this entire remarkable experience for me began with one phone call
Yeah.
from Jim Peterick saying, "Hey, do you want to play on this record?" Um, and everything that followed from it was the result of what had happened before. And of course, each time what happened was remarkable, and it was clear to everybody that we should keep doing it.
Right.
And those initial concerts were very successful, and there was so much excitement and love from
Yeah.
fans that I know that it warmed Brian up to the idea of performing live because he was nervous about it, and he never stopped being nervous about it.
Uh,
But I think he came to uh, really enjoy the time on stage when he could feel the appreciation and love from fans. Um, and he loved doing music. And he enjoyed hanging out with the band and being out uh, playing because he's a musician after all. And that's what he
yeah.
does. So,
Yeah. And of course, the first time we saw you all was at the Pet Sounds tour. So you came to London. I think we went to see you twice, actually. And man,
mhm.
we were blown away. I mean, what is happening? All of a sudden, Brian I was one of the guys like Probin who was listening to old stuff in the 80s, Smile cassettes and things like that. And we were all geeks. But there you all were, I mean, that was just like a revelation. So many. How did it feel?
Yeah. In, um, in some ways, I was so wrapped up in what we were doing and doing the music in performing and rehearsing and playing the uh, uh, the reaction um, of the reaction of fans and audiences was surprising to me and a little bit overwhelming. Uh, and in a way, I'm not sure that I completely that I was able to take it in to have the bandwidth to understand that.
Right.
Uh, but there were plenty of moments when I was on stage and suddenly, you know, uh, we played "Don't Talk," "Lay Your Head on My Shoulder," and it would such a beautiful, like misty blue cloud of music floating through me, and I'd be looking at Brian's back while he's sitting at the piano, thinking, "Wow, he wrote this. That's the guy," you know. Uh, but most of the time, I was just thinking about, playing the music
Yeah.
properly and doing it
Do,
justice. So
doing the
that was
technical.
usually at the forefront of my
When
mind. Get
when
on
did you
stage, do a good
Sure.
job.
And you became musical director, of course. I mean, that was after several years, I guess, was it, or some years of actually playing. Who made that decision? Was that Brian? Did
Yeah.
Brian ask you to do that?
Uh, yeah. Well, Brian and Melinda talked to me about it, and
Okay.
it was Melinda who proposed it to
Okay.
me, and Brian was comfortable and supportive of that
Lovely.
decision. Um, and to be clear, I've always thought of myself as a band leader in that role because nobody in the band needs to be directed
Mm.
on what they should play. And of course, Probin and Darian in particular are deep scholars of the music. And so my role as music director, quote, was I felt like it was more, um, working with Brian on the set list, deciding what songs he wanted to play, taking that information to the band, uh, running rehearsals, sound check, kind of herding the cats, as they say, to keep everything
Right.
on track.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I always felt of myself as as more of a band leader, and kind of helping keep things running smoothly.
You had a nickname as the semiconductor, wasn't that? Weren't you called the semiconductor by some of the band?
Yeah, yeah.
I like that.
I uh, I actually came up with that myself. That
Okay.
little joke. I think I referred to myself as a semiconductor. Um, uh,
Right.
as you may know that semiconductors are used in electronic equipment, for producing music.
Sure.
And the fact that I was conducting occasionally, mostly just turning around and cueing the string section or something like that. Anyway, everybody
Okay.
thought that the idea
That
of
was conducting.
semiconductor was funny, and um, uh, I cherish that nickname very much.
I love that. Yeah, you're really great. And when you'd done the Pet Sounds tour and then Smile was talked about, how soon were you involved in putting that together? Was that really quickly as soon as it was discussed, or did that come a little later? Can you remember about that?
Yeah, the uh, the idea had been uh, discussed, and everybody was well aware of it from the very beginning. And we knew that Darian was meeting with Brian, and then Van Dyke joined the two of them. Um, so everybody was up to speed on that, and the plan from the beginning was that they would um, put the music together, and Darian began creating demo versions of the songs, including the order and the transitions and all that. So Darian was at the front of that project. He created all of the um, rehearsal material
Okay.
for the band to use, and uh, everybody learned their parts off of the records, the recordings that Darian had created with Brian and Van Dyke. And then having all of that stuff in hand, we met in LA. I want to say it was 2 weeks before the premiere to start rehearsing in earnest. It seems to me that I know we rehearsed a lot. I've never worked so hard on anything, any project. And uh, so it began with the three of them, and continued with rehearsals in LA. And then we went to London. And honestly, I don't think we really had an idea of what it was that we were doing, or at least we didn't have an idea of what the reaction would be. Um, we all felt that it was really cool. I mean, we were loving it and we thought it was great. And there was also this thing in the back of the mind that said, I hope everybody else likes it, because we have no idea, no one had heard it, and we just weren't sure, what the reaction would be. We had high hopes and we believed in it strongly, but the uh, the premiere in London was uh, a massive affirmation of what we felt we had been doing. So
It was incredible. We were there, and I must admit it changed my life. having listened to little bits of snippets of bootlegs and probably old cassettes for the years, and then there it was. And I remember I managed to get backstage. I haven't got the T-shirt, but I had an original Smile T-shirt, and I got in backstage and I saw Brian, and I just didn't know what to say, but I just thanked him. And I remember saying to Jeff Foskett, I said, Jeff, I said, it's healed me. Because I think I was going through a little bit of stuff, and I know a lot of people felt the same. It was a healing experience. It was just a magic. And
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, I was on, and then we came again. I think the next night we got in, and then Portsmouth, I think,
yeah,
and Bristol, or wherever. We just followed you everywhere.
yeah.
Magnificent, my friends, and
Um,
wow,
yeah, yeah. It was a wonderful time, and um, uh, I have the whole thing is kind of wrapped up in a golden haze for me
yeah,
because, as I said, uh, I don't didn't really know what we had. I loved it, um, and to see somebody, um, to see Brian uh, retrieve part of his legacy, part of his life that. At the time, people said it was a failure, that it was not, uh, and there's a lot of speculation about the whether he could have finished it or whether it really mattered. I mean, all of that was um, was blown away by the performance. So yeah, to see someone get part of their life back, their legacy, is an incredible gift to have been close to it, to have been involved in it and watch it happen. It's amazing.
that's wonderful to hear that. And of course, Paul, we've got a few of the albums that you were involved in here on the back here, particularly. Are there any that you'd like to talk about in terms of recording and working with Brian in the studio on other albums of his and yours? I mean, what would you like? What do you remember keenly, or some anecdotes or anything really?
Um, the uh, the Lucky Old Sun record was really exciting to work on because uh, those songs came together when Brian started showing up at Scott's house
Yeah.
and saying, "Hey, let's record a song." And Scott was
Okay.
like, "Okay, wait, let me turn on the computer."
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
so those songs came from a really spontaneous place for Brian, from a desire to, get down some of these songs and music that he had in his head. Um, uh, Scott did a brilliant job of capturing it and guiding the process, and then the band was brought in to record them, to do final recordings of the demos that uh, Brian was creating with Scott. Um, and then we premiered that also at Festival Hall. Um, uh, and I think there's some beautiful, beautiful songs um, on there. Midnight's Another Day is a standout for me.
Sure.
Um, the um, Brian was given access to these uh, what are called trunk songs, meaning literally found in a trunk, of George Gershwin's from the Gershwin estate. And he was given access to these fragments and unfinished songs, unpublished pieces of music, um, and invited to choose some things that he would want to finish, to complete. Um, and so I worked with Brian on going through those many, many, sometimes just snippets of music. We would play them one at a time, and Brian would go, "No, no, maybe." Just each little snippet, and we winnowed it down to a few things that he wanted to listen to further and make a contribution to. So those songs are a legitimate collaboration between Brian and George Gershwin.
Mhm.
Um, and the rest of that record was comprised of Gershwin songs that Brian had a particular affinity for.
Mm.
Um, so working in the studio on that record was a matter of, uh, Brian choosing the songs, working on the Gershwin fragments, but also interpreting other songs that he liked doing. So we would talk
Mm.
about what kind of a groove would be behind the song or what kind of approach he wanted to use for each. I prepared enough written music so that we could go in the studio with the band, the rhythm section, and start laying down tracks, and then Brian would guide the band as once they started playing and the song was starting to stand up and walk around, then Brian would begin to shape the arrangement.
Okay.
I wrote the orchestration uh, after that, after the rhythm section was completed. Um, so that was,
Wow.
you know, for me was a great privilege and a completely stimulating and exhausting and thrilling experience. So yeah, that was a high point for me in terms of working in the studio with Brian. Um, we did work with Phil Ramone in the studio a couple of times, and that was also really exciting because obviously Phil Ramone is one of the great pop music producers, and to see how he acts as a producer in the studio
Mhm.
was really interesting to me because he didn't seem to be doing much at all except kind of focusing the energy when it needed to be, and that was interesting to see someone acting as a producer who was not, a tyrant or saying this is okay, this is what we're going to do. It's more like, what do you got, guys? Hey, that sounds
Okay.
great. He was really a great person to work with.
Interesting. I mean, when you were doing the Gershwin, did you and Brian sort of agree often on the fragments? Would you, if he said, I don't really think much of that, would you have agreed with that, or would you have some differences on some of those pieces, do you think?
I I just took him at his word.
Okay.
There wasn't any time that I thought he was passing over or uh, making a bad call. I felt like really it had to be come entirely from him, or else it wouldn't be
Yeah, it wouldn't work.
uh, uh, it wouldn't work because I mean one thing about Brian is that um, uh, he it was hard for him to say no, and I'm well aware of that because uh, he I think he was uncomfortable with that uh, kind of confrontation or like pushing back. And I know that we had to be careful in the band when we were rehearsing to allow Brian the time to speak. Everybody's got ideas. There's a whole room full of talented people, but we wanted to hear it from Brian. So everyone had to hold back on their own ideas because, it we would miss out on what Brian was really thinking. So giving him space to make decisions was an important part, I felt, of uh, uh, what I needed to do and what the whole band needed to do to to allow Brian to do his work.
Okay.
That's a long answer to your question, but yeah.
No, that's okay.